Hey everybody. So the twins, Caroline and Justine, are dropping to Persona 5X, and their kit can be a little intimidating. So I went ahead and I put together a little um, consolidated list so that you can see what roles they fit and what buffs they give in said roles. Now, the ways that the twins work is that they have four different masks. Each mask corresponds to two different element pairs that contrast each other, right? So you have fire and ice, you have wind electric, you have nuke and psi, and you have blessing curse. So when you use when the battle is getting ready to start, you can select two of these options out of the four, and those will be your first and second slot skills. It doesn't seem to really matter which one. It might matter for your A3, A5 scenario if you're wailing that hard. You'll need to decide which of those two are going to do more damage. But if you're already going to 3 and 5, most likely you're going for 6, you're a whale. You're going to have more fun when we get there later in the conversation. So, essentially what happens is when you have two of these masks, it changes the role that they fit. So, for example, when you have the fire and ice and the wind and electric masks, this is the first one that's listed on the description, it puts them into a healer state. So they can substitute for, say, Smoko, or they can substitute for Marion, or who have you. Surprise, surprise, they could probably even replace Mona. I know, I'm shocked too! Um, so I'm gonna go basically in order, explaining the masks that you use, the buffs that they give. It's something called appearance, but it's functioning the same thing. You can just tie these into what the element pairs are or the masks, and then what the bonuses you get from the skills 1 and 2, right? So you're dealing the dual element damage, plus you're getting another effect. These then feed into what the third skill's damage winds up being, and then on top of that, you have additional passive effects that exist because of set pairs. Now, one other brief aside before we get too far into it is that when you select these characters, or these masks rather, they have options to use the highlights corresponding to the different masks. They have 4 different highlights available. One for the fire and ice, one for the wind electric, one for the nuke and psychic, and then one for the blessing curse. Those are your options. Now, we don't have the exact percentage increases for some of these skills just yet. And we get closer to the A6. Take it with a grain of salt because we don't quite, at least for my own sake, I can't say I fully understand how, what's it called? How this True Desire buff works. It says it uses all masks. And if you can already see where that's heading and how much of a snowball that's going to turn into, oh boy, the numbers. But we'll come back into that. The A6 might be a huge game changer on what role and how they fit into things, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the healer. So this is your fire, ice, wind, electric combination. This is called childish. This is the mask of mischief and innocence, and the mask of devotion and caution. Now, Mischief and Innocence is mainly a party buffing, attack increasing set, and the Devotion and Caution are, pardon me, Devotion and Caution are essentially your, like, I don't want to say defense because it's not defense, it's damage mitigation, right? Which kind of makes them awkward for Yusuke as an example. But essentially, what happens is when you use the fire and ice and the wind electric, your skills 1 and 2 will wind up increasing the party's attack by X percentage and decreases the damage taken by X percentage, not defense increase. If it was defense increase, this would be way, way, way better for, say, like a Yusuke team, maybe also for S Puppet, but that's, again, down the line. I don't really have full understanding of her kit outside the fact that she drinks like an ocean of SP per turn. Crazy things. So the way that their kit works is essentially you're going to be hitting both S1 and S2 and then S3, right? It's a kind of simple rotation. The A1 seems to shift that into an auto cast of the S3 as long as you have both masks. So you might be getting a free S3 at the start or end of the turn based off whichever masks you currently have available. In which case, you're basically just doing S1, S2 spam. And I don't know if it matters which one you're doing priority. You're probably going to be the in this case, you probably want to start with the fire for the extra attack increase. Now, what does the S3 do? So the S3 is going to be unique based off each of the 6 options. So in this case, you're going to get an HP restoration and increases the damage dealt, alongside increasing the party's attack and decreasing the damage taken from the original S1 and 2. The passive effect, which is again unique to each of the 6 options, in this case, increases the healing effect by X percentage and also increases the party's damage dealt again, right? So the other thing you're going to wind up getting with this is you're going to have options, like I mentioned about the highlights. For the healer, it's going to be an increase to the party's attack and to the damage dealt, or restoring HP and increasing max HP. So each of these highlights, the highlights give 2 different effects, though the next ones will include some damage. These ones are strictly healing and strictly buffing, right? So for your A0, most likely this is not going to be your best option. The best option is most likely this one. This is Mask of Mischief and Innocence and Mask of Absurdity and Paralogism. This is your strategist. This is your stand-in for, say, your support characters like Horde or who have you. This is going to include childishness and patternlessness, or patternless. So this is your Fire, Ice, Nuke, Psi. And your skill 1 is going to increase the party's attack by X percentage and increases the party's pierce rate. So this is already something akin to like a Cherishes passes or something, or Marion. Now, on top of that, we don't know the hard numbers, and it's gonna depend on what those wind up being. But that has an opportunity to get really silly, especially if we can consider the skill 3. The skill 3, on top of already increasing the party's attack and pierce rate, now also increases the party's skill damage, except for Caroline and Justine, and we'll go back to explaining that in a second, and the party's crit damage. Now, the passive for this one is it increases the Caroline and Justine's speed, so that hopefully they'll wind up shifting ahead of your DPS, but we don't know how much of a speed increase that is going to be, and how much you might need to manage around the other members of your party. There's another set in here, we'll get to it later. I believe it's the debuffing set, the Saboteur. That's going to wind up having the similar speed thing, but we don't know if that's going to be different amounts of speed compared to the Strategist. Now, again, so they get a speed increase, plus also the party's attack increases by X percentage. So we're already getting 2 things of attack amplification, and pierce rate, and skill damage, and crit damage, and this is the silly one. This is the unique effect for the strategist. Skill effect amplification. Now, skill effect amplification increases the persona skill's thief tactics skill effect through skill level increase by X. The effect is calculated separately with all other amplification effects. What the hell does that mean? Okay, so functionally, and we'll still need to see in testing, but essentially what they do is they give functionally an extra level or more to your party's skills. So you already know that if you've gotten anybody to A6, say on your Leon or your Phoebe or whoever you might have, the differences between a 10 and a 13 or 10 and a 12 is massive. And especially for your 4-star characters who have a limit of 12, well, now they have 13, which means that possibly the max cap that they could have is up to, say, 6,000 attack or something. Maybe that's gonna be 6,500 or something like that. So you get even more effect, more of those. Say, for example, Vino's defense shred from her S1 might be more than 38.8%. Same thing with Soy. Same thing with all these different characters. There's huge potential, but again, we need to see. But essentially, that's what's going to be, is it's going to raise everybody's effective ability. Let's see, which is, funny enough, going to stack with the other side of the A0, which gives a +1 to all of Wonder's persona levels. Highlights everything just for existing. They don't even need to be the fight for that. So that's a separate, these guys are busted. All right. The highlights you're going to get for the strategist is it's going to increase the party's attack and the damage dealt, which is your fire mask, or this is where you're going to start getting some damage. You can get a nuclear and psychic damage to one foe, and increase Caroline Justine's attack, and increase the DPS's attack separately. It's going to, so the way it explains is that it's going to go to the highest attack unit with a priority towards sweepers and assassins, if they can. I don't know that if you don't have, I would assume from this that it's impossible for them to trigger themselves twice with that buff. So probably have to move to somebody else. So maybe it might go to Wonder. It depends on how you have your team set up. Your mileage might vary. But this is more for like if you have like a sub DPS type role, which we haven't really had a need for just yet, but we'll hopefully probably be getting there as we get closer towards Crow. Maybe they bumped that up earlier because these guys exist. I'm not sure. There's a different role that might be a little bit better towards that, but we'll get to it. Okay, now, so the Mask of Mischief and Innocence and the Mask of Fortune and Ruin, which are your Fire, Ice, Curse, and Bless, make them a sweeper unit. Now, the S1 and S2 for this increases the party's attack by X%, and then this is where the Destiny sounds really good on paper, but then you kind of realize this is just for them. It increases Caroline and Justine's attack, Caroline and Justine's damage dealt, and Caroline and Justine's crit rate. So this is just for their damage, but it turns their S3 from a single target almighty attack to an AoE almighty attack. Whether that's going to be good for some of the fights, it's too early to say. I don't know how that's necessarily going to work for, say, a Dominion fight or something to that effect. We don't know how the Almighty is going to kind of compare to other things, but they sound like they have a great opportunity to do some kind of silly nonsense. So the highlights for let me walk back a little bit. The passive effect for the sweeper is it increases Caroline and Justine's crit rate by X% just out the gate. The highlights in this case are your party attack and damage dealt, which is again your fire masks or fire ice mask, and the other highlight option is the bless and curse damage to one foe, and increases Caroline Justine's attack and Caroline Justine's crit damage for X number of turns. Most likely 2. I think a lot of these might wind up being 2 turns. It depends, and it's going to make the A1 even more tempting, since then you don't have to worry about like trying to double up. You're back and forth, because otherwise you wind up maybe like losing one of those when you go to cast the S3. So A1 might be very, very, very tempting for people. I don't see a reason why not, aside from lack of funds, and don't spend money you don't have on a gotcha game. That should go without being said. So that's your sweeper role. I don't know that it's going to wind up being better than any other like dedicated sweeper. If you don't have a unit, this might not be a bad option. Let's say you don't have a Yusuke and you need it for an ice fight. Maybe this is going to be better because of the Almighty. The next one is going to wind up being the Guardian. Right, this is your tank. So this is Mask of Devotion and Caution and Mask of Absurdity and Paralogism. And so that's your Wind, Electric, Nuke, and Psychic. So in this case, you're getting Admonishment and Patternless, and your S1 and 2 are going to decrease the damage taken by X% and increases the party's pierce rate. So, Cherish, essentially. Though, again, it's a damage decrease. It's a damage mitigation as opposed to defense increase. So Cherish might have a bit of advantage on, say, like a Yusuke team. Now, the skill 3 in this case winds up granting a shield and a down point and increases the party's defense. So this is Cherish's third skill, essentially. But it has a little bit more like build up to be able to cast as opposed to him being able to cast like once every other action. But it might be effectively the same thing. But I think there's other things in his kit that might be better. It depends on, again, what the final numbers are for these. The passive for this one is increases the shield effect. Which goes, makes sense for the tank. And your highlights are going to wind up either being a HP restoration and increasing the max HP, that's your wind electric, or your new psychic damage to one foe, increasing Caroline and Justine's attack and increasing the DPS's attack. So again, this is one would probably be on the lower side because the other highlight you'd be getting from them, the nuke psychic, and the attack increases the DPS is not going to help somebody like Yusuke. Or again, I think like S Puppet. I think she's also a defense focused character. So that's not great, but it might not be bad so much for say Kasumi or maybe somebody like what do you call it? Mesa. They might actually work very well as a shielder for Mesa, or Ryuji even actually, because then you're getting the shield, so he can continue to burn through his HP without worry. Again, ultimately, it's going to depend on how much of an HP situation we're dealing with, or like attack increase, how much shield is given, etc. But there's potential there. And again, when we get back to the A6, you're going to start seeing some silly numbers. So, the next one is your Saboteur. This is your other speed increaser. This is your Vino. This is your Rin. This is Admonishment and Destiny. This is Wind Electric and Curse and Bless. Now, the S1 and 2 for this one decreases the damage taken by X% and increases Caroline Justine's attack by... the S1 and S2, rather, they decrease the damage taken, and they will wind up increasing the Caroline and Justine's attack, Caroline and Justine's damage dealt, and Caroline and Justine's crit rate. The S3 inflicts Windswept Shock with 100% on the main target, 2 stacks of Curse, 2 stacks of Blessing for the party, and increases the defense down. We don't have these numbers, but it's kind of actually stepping into Vino's role. Fun enough, it's giving you the two, how do I say this? This gives you 2 of the 4 elemental ailments you would need, but it doesn't give you nuclear. So for Queen, you're probably still going to want to run Vino, and I'm sure the defense shred is probably even better. But it's definitely got potential. But I think it's probably one of the worst ones on the list as a go-to. Caroline Justine's passive in this case is again the speed increase, and it also increases all foes damage taken. Your highlights in this case, again, are going to be your HP restoration, increasing max HP, or Blessing Curse damage to one foe, plus increasing Caroline Justine's attack and crit damage. So, as far as the Saboteur, it's not so great when you consider other characters might have like an extra damage taken from the highlight. So, Rin, for example. But, if for whatever reason you don't have those, you can go back to these guys. And this is going to be the last one. And this is where, again, your mileage is going to vary. Because it sounds really nice on paper, but we don't know about it in practice. I can't say if this is necessarily going to exceed, say, like a queen on Atabaka or something like that, or a ball, or what have you. So this is going to be Mask of Absurdity and Paralogism, and the Mask of Fortune and Ruin. This is your Assassin. This is your single target DPS. Patternless and Destiny. Nuke Psychic, Curse and Bless. So, what happens is with this is you're going to increase the party's Pierce rate, and then increase Caroline and Justine's attack, damage dealt, and their crit rate. Makes sense. They're the main DPS in this case. Their S3 is going to be a single target almighty damage that deals an extra tick of damage, similar to, say, Queen with the nuclear sets, or say Vino with the truth set, same thing. And they're going to gain a unique ability called their Surveillance of the Rebel. Now, Surveillance of the Rebel, when casting skills, temporarily gain X% of all advanced attributes from the Sweeper Assassin allies, except for Caroline and Justine with the highest attack. So, this is your sub-DPS, I suppose. Right? Where it's trying to borrow, similar to how the Navigators wind up giving a percentage of their attack stats and all of their stats across the board to all of the party. They're not taking it away, but they're getting an additional increase based off whatever the stats of your main DPS are. So they're going to be good for having just an extra bit of damage. Maybe they might be good for something like a who knows? Maybe for Ball with Mesa or something like that, or it's not going to work for probably it's not going to work for Queen. Your mileage might vary on this one. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to see some practice on this. The passive increases crit damage by X%. So as opposed to crit rate from the sweeper, it's a crit damage increase. And again, I believe this is just for her. This is not a party-wide thing. Your highlights are going to be your nuke and psychic damage to one foe, increasing Caroline Justine attack and increase the DPS attack. So again, that's mainly for your double DPSing. And Blessing Curse damage to one foe, increasing Caroline Justine attack and Caroline crit damage. So if they're just going to be the individual a single target DPS. So this might actually be a little painful if you're not running a double DPS setup. Like if you're running double DPS because you want to get an advantage from surveillance of the rebel, then in that case, like you're gonna want to use this nuke and psychic damage to be able to get 2 major increases from the highlight if you're using their highlight at all and not whatever the DPS's highlight is, depending on if you're running like core with them. Okay, so this has been about 20 something minutes. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start up again with the A2. So the A2 gives an extra passive effect. When you're using these masks, or it gives an additional effect when you have the masks on and in combination for your S3. So, back to the top, we're just going to run through these so that you can hear, and I'm going to skip the highlights because the highlights don't change, but so you get an idea of what you're dealing with. So, for your healers, now you're going to go end up getting an increase to the party's attack, increase to damage dealt, or well, damage taken from the enemy. You're going to get an additional increase to the party's attack, an increase to the damage taken, so you're getting twice what you're already getting, plus also a healing effect increase and a party damage, even more party damage dealt. So we're also getting the restores HP and damage dealt from the S3. So we're getting 4 different sources of increasing damage dealt or taken, and then 2 different things for party attack increase and heals. It's kind of nuts. Your strategist, this is again the one that we're probably going to wind up finding to be the best or most common use for them, is now going to give you an increase to the party's attack, increase to the party's pierce rate, increase to the party's attack, increase to Caroline Justine's crit damage, increase to the DPS's crit damage, increases the party's skill damage, except for Caroline Justine, increase to the party crit damage again, increases the Caroline Justine speed, and increases the party's attack. So we're getting 3 different sources of increasing the party's attack. We're getting 1 source of pierce. We're getting, looks like, 2 sources of crit damage increasing to Carolina Justine and the DPS, and everybody else gets 1. Increases the party's skill damage, except for Caroline Justine, and this is the one where it's increasing the level for the damage. So Queen's going to do even more damage now. All this is just within the A2. This is all just the passive effect and everything like that. How many different stacks and sources of attack increases are you getting? It's crazy. Next is going to be Sweeper. So Sweeper now is going to increase the party's attack, increases the party's attack again, increases Caroline Justine's attack, increases Caroline Justine's damage dealt, increases Caroline Justine's crit rate, and increases the party's skill damage. So this actually affects, again, the base number. So it's similar now to the effect you were getting from the strategist. And the S3, the Almighty type becomes AoE, and increases Caroline Justine's crit rate by X%. You can see it's already starting to snowball into something massive. Now, next thing we get is going to be your Guardian. This is back to your tank. This is going to decrease the damage taken by X%. Decreases the damage taken by another X%, increases the party's crit rate, pierce rate, increases Caroline Justine's crit damage, and the DPS's crit damage. So now the AT actually becomes even more tempting for, say, like a use case situation, because even if she's only giving attack, it's kind of like running, who would be a good scenario? I don't want to say like Dominion, where you're getting the damage up plus the attack from Cohesion or something to that effect. I mean, in that case, you could run Akakacha, but that's a separate conversation. But you're getting a ton of crit damage and pierce and everything else just for having a shielder. And then you also get the shield effect increased by X%, but that's small potatoes relative. Now we're going to go back to our Saboteur. This is our debuffer. In this case, now you're going to end up getting a decrease to the damage taken by X%, increasing Caroline and Justine's attack, crit damage, and damage dealt and their crit rate. Increases damage taken by X%. So that's 2 instances of that. Increases the party's skill damage. Inflicts Windswept, Shock, 2 stacks curses defense down and blessing. And increases all foes damage taken by X%. And lastly, penultimately, we have the Assassin. Now, the Assassin at A2 increases the party's crit rate, or pierce rate rather, increases Caroline Justine's attack, Caroline Justine's damage dealt, Caroline Justine's crit rate, Caroline Justine's crit damage, the DPS crit damage, increases the party's skill damage, and then the single target get almighty damage deals an extra ticket damage, plus you gain surveillance of the rebel, which again leeches, or not leeches, she buffs herself as with a percentage of whatever your other DPS's stats are, plus an extra bit of crit damage for her. So she is getting at least 2 different sources of crit damage, a pierce rate increase, attack increase, damage increase, crit rate increase, skill damage increase. Yeah, it starts to get silly. Now, closing this off, this is where I want you guys to take this with a grain of salt. I haven't even covered the weapon. Really quick, let's talk about the weapon, because this applies to every single one of these kits. So take everything I said and then add on top of that. She gets her attack increase. That's base. Increases something called Persona Strength by X% after casting Mask of Duality, which we don't quite know, but it seems to be part of like the multiplier on how her skills are like increasing the amount of attack given or what have you. And it's your defense down equal to X% of ailment accuracy or what have you. So this is your Persona Strength by X% after casting Mask of Duality. That's a skill 3. Increases all allies damage dealt by X%. And crit damage by X% after obtaining any appearance for X turns and up to X stacks. So every single time you're casting the 1 or 2, you're getting the extra crit damage and damage dealt. Whatever that number is. Party-wide. Huge. The passive 1 is... so the other passives I was mentioning, those are all from the passive 2. This is going to be your passive 1. So start of battle increases Persona Strength based on attributes. So every 100 attack, increase percentage strength by X up to X. 1% of damage dealt increases Persona Strength X up to X. Crit damage, X up to X. So the weapon gives a party-wide damage dealt and crit damage, and then her passive 1 increases her own attack, damage dealt, and crit damage to start. So the weapon is just doubling up on top of that. Huge. Insane. Okay, now, this is your whale rotation. And funny enough, this actually winds up becoming even better for, say, like an MLD kind of situation. If it works as it seems to from initial reading. Okay. This is True Desire. This is the whale rotation. This is the whale roll. So, this now gives you Childishness, Admonishment, Patternless, and Destiny. This gives you all 4 masks, 8 elements, fire, ice, wind, electric, nuke, psychic, curse, and bless when you use this, and it will wind up giving the effect of all of the masks at the same time. So it's going to increase your party's attack by X%, decreases the damage taken by X%, party pierce rate increase, increases Caroline Justine's attack, Caroline Justine's damage, Caroline Justine's crit rate, and it's going to increase the party's attack by X%, an additional X%, decreases the damage taken by X%, Caroline Justine's crit damage, the DPS's crit damage, increases the party's skill damage, and then when we use the skill 3, we're going to wind up getting these things as well. We're going to wind up getting an increase of the party's skill damage, except for Caroline Justine and the party's crit damage. The Almighty becomes an AoE. The Almighty gets an extra tick of damage. It grants a shield, plus 1 down point, plus party's defense. It inflicts the Windswept Shock, 2 stacks of curse, defense down, 2 stacks blessing. You get the skill level increase that we were talking about before, and you also get the additional attack and stats percentage of whatever your DPS is. And also, we're not done. You get the healing effect increase by X% plus party damage dealt. You get a Caroline and Justine speed increase plus party attack increase by X%. Caroline and Justine crit rate increases. Shield effect increases. Caroline Justine speed increase plus all foes damage taken X%. And lastly, crit damage increases by X%. On top of your extra weapons giving you attack, damage, and crit damage. All of these things. Now, we don't exactly know what the cooldown is going to be on this. The A6 is supposed to trigger immediately on turn 1, similar to the A1, right? So you're immediately going to be able to pop off with this S3 when it gets their action. Now, what's the cooldown going to be? I don't know. It's possible it's either going to be a once every other turn, or it could be similar to Cord, and where it's going to be the immediate pop on 1, and then it has like a 1-turn cooldown and then a 2-turn cooldown. Possibly, don't know. We don't have any information, but that would hopefully wind up lining it up automatically with your 1, 3, and 6 turn casts, which would be great for like an MLD rotation or SOS rotation. If it works as it reads, where it fuses all of the masks, you get all of the benefits at the same time, this is ridiculous. You get like 37 different sources of buff, which is kind of cracked. So, I don't know that A6 is going to be the best for everybody. It sounds like A6 is going to get kind of silly, because A6 basically lets you put either as the healer or the guardian mask. And this is where my mind is going. We're going a bit of theory crafting, on the fly. If we're going to look at the healer highlight options, because your highlight options still, I think, are going to be tied to whatever your first 2 masks that you selected were. You're either going to wind up getting the party increase attack plus decreases damage taken. I'm sorry. Party attack plus damage dealt. That sounds right. That's the highlight. That's your fire mask. Or restoring HP, increasing max HP. Who cares? Or, for your guardian situation, if you're putting them in as a tank, you're going to wind up getting the HP restoration or the nuke psychic damage to 1 foe, increases Caroline Justine's attack plus increases DPS attack. So it's going to be a question of which of those highlight options are better overall for A6. Whether it's better to have the nuke psychic damage plus the increase to Caroline Justine's attack and the DPS's attack, or strictly the attack and damage up for the party. That's really going to come down to, again, what the final numbers look like for these highlights. But again, this is the kind of things. I haven't gone through a whole 32-minute long spiel. Kind of doubled up because, once we get through the first 20 minutes or something, we're giving the initial, we're reiterating some of the information that's already available to you. But this is the kind of thing we're dealing with this brand new character. You can see she's complicated. She's busy. She has a lot of different moving parts in ways that things kind of synergize. But if you need to, you can always go back to I'm going to try to timestamp in this section or this video where the different classes are, and I'm going to note the A0 versus the A2 because that's your big change. Your 3 and your 4. Your 3 and your 5 rather are going to wind up being your increases to the base skill effects that you get from Caroline and Justine's S1, S2, the highlight, etc. And the S3. And then I would like to double check one last thing before we go. And this is going to wind up being the A4 for the highlight effect. The highlight effect for A4 now also gives an additional attack and damage dealt after casting a highlight. All allies would gain the same effect. So just an additional party attack and party damage buff on top of everything else that you're already getting. So again, for A6, you're going to do even crazier numbers. So now we're getting, 39 different buffs? Silly numbers, silly potential. But it'll be cool. Again, take everything I'm saying from the A6 section on with a grain of salt, and I'll probably even put that in parentheses. And these are also all going to be dependent on what the final damage, like the final buff numbers that we're getting, how they're going to compare to other units, either in CN or here on Global, and what that's going to mean overall. And the only thing we know for now is just that they do this, and that they're going to be variable based off of whatever the level of your characters and so on and so forth. But I mean, man, they've got an insane potential. So, I hope this clears things up. If you guys have more questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to see what I can explain and whatnot. When we actually get real numbers, I'm going to probably put another video out that explains in clearer and finer detail exactly how much of an increase you're getting. This doesn't even take into account the rev set options. So, I hope this clears things up. I hope this gives you guys some insight, and it's not too overwhelming just from the kit, or the video itself is too overwhelming. But yeah, like I said, any questions, feel free to ask. You can either put them in the comments or put them in the Discord, and I'll be happy to look at any time that I have.